There's 70% of the world's of silver is refined by China, not just from their own mines, but from doré they import globally and then historically have re-exported to Western markets. That pipeline shuts down in 2 weeks. So you look at all of these things happening at once. To answer your question, you have strategic resource competition where China's flying to Mexico and to Peru, which are the number 1 and 3 largest producers in the world, China too, and buying doré and concentrate right from these countries, from the miners before it even becomes silver, shipping it back to China and refining it themselves. They're paying double what the West will for sludge, which is concentrate, and crudely refined bars, and disintermediating the marketplace. They're buying it in the pre-refined stage.
Why?
And then
Why?
because it allows them to gobble it up without anyone knowing. In other words, they go to the miners in Peru and they go to the miners in Mexico and say, we'll pay you double what the West will, but we want it all. Give us your sludge, give us your doré bars, which are crudely refined bars that get crudely refined and then sent to the refiners to be purely refined. So they're like, we want a disintermediate, give it to us, we'll pay you double. Because the silver is more important to the Chinese than the money that they're using. They're de-dollarizing. They're taking their dollars and buying up all the commodities, getting rid of dollars for something worth more than dollars. So you have the strategic resource competition between great powers, right? China and the U.S. U.S. says it's strategic. China says, fine, it's strategic, and we're going to limit exports. The European Union did this in 2023. But you also have supply shocks from export restrictions that's now going to come from China. They're not going to export anything, and they refine 70% of the world's silver. But here's another reason maybe the price. I'll give you several reasons the prices are flying. The Economic Times just reported the other day that JPMorgan now holds over 750 million ounces of physical silver. They reported this, but that's more than $40 billion worth, by the way. And on your show, I keep telling you who's bringing in billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions every month into COMEX. Who the hell's got this kind of money? But this would be, if true, and reported by the Economic Times, it would be the largest stockpile on planet Earth. And
they benefit for the prices going up. They're making a killing.
They always did. Or they did not, but now they do. And because the article goes on to say that they didn't just stop shorting silver, because they had been the big short for a long time trying to hold it down, so if price went up, it would kill them. They flip-flop.
According to Andy Schectman, a massive and largely ignored shift is underway in the gold and silver markets. China is paying premium prices to buy silver directly from miners, bypassing Western exchanges as de-dollarization accelerates. JPMorgan has flipped from the biggest silver short to the biggest long, while physical silver is disappearing from COMEX and LBMA faces growing delivery delays. Big institutions are quietly moving into metals as this cycle turns geopolitical, not financial. Thanks for watching. Give a thumbs up and subscribe to Fine Metals for more updates.
And sovereign wealth funds that were never coordinated or motivated to take on the West, never wealthy enough to do so. But when you get, central banks and sovereign wealth funds on the back of central banks, you're dealing that are now very wealthy. These countries were third world 20 years ago, but now all of a sudden they're wealthy, motivated, coordinated, sophisticated, see exactly what we're doing and say, you want to hold down the paper price? Great. We're going to stand for delivery because these contracts give us the reason or the ability to do so. Even though nobody ever did, we're gonna. And that's what's changing the game. It's the huge deliveries that has rewritten the rules. And when you have a system based on trust where no one stands for delivery, that's Bernie Madoff. You kill it. Yeah. But when everyone says, Bernie, I need my money. Bernie, where's my money? Bernie, where is my money? 8 weeks. What do you mean, Bernie? Well, Bernie's dead, was in jail. The point of it is that it's the same thing. So Tesla and Sony and Samsung, they're all like, oh, shit, the price is going up and the demand, we better jump in now or we're in trouble because we only need this much to build a phone or an iPad or a computer or a car battery or whatever. They need it. So the higher the price goes, the higher the demand is. They need it. And everyone's battling. Who took 16.6 million ounces out of COMEX? Goodbye, out the door. Who's buying it? Is it Elon Musk? Don't know. But that also goes on to say that they moved 169 million ounces out of the eligible category into a non-deliverable vault. I never really thought about this because that's just the same thing as leaving. Well, in essence, the metal still exists on paper, but it's legally removed from the delivery system, and it would need to be re-registered, meaning reassayed, in order to get into the COMEX settlement system. It cannot be delivered. So basically what you're seeing is not defensive posturing, it's intentional removal of metal from the delivery pool. And if it's true, I have no reason to believe it's not, it marks a massive shift from suppressing silver with paper to accumulating metal. And at the same time, we talk about all of these huge deliveries. In November, which was an off-cycle delivery month for both gold and silver, that's a lot of money. Who's doing it? This is the biggest money on the planet, and huge money that is doing this. And so when you take a look at what's happening, why is silver going higher? It's happening because, you know, you have, I guess you have massive deliveries, and at the same time, you have the biggest short in the market now flipping to the biggest long on the planet, the biggest amount of silver stockpile on the planet, and they're the custodians of SLV, which is the largest silver trust on the planet. He said the article says they flipped and became the biggest long in the market. That in just 6 weeks they've added 21 million ounces to their position while closing a 200 million ounce paper short position, which removes pressure on the downside, and the buying of the metal physically pushes prices way up. And it also goes on to say that they pulled 16.6 million ounces out of the registered inventory. So there's eligible and there's registered. Eligible means it could be put into registered to back the bars. We have 9 Brinks vaults around North America. One of them is in New York City, JFK. And if you own 1,000-ounce bars in that vault, which some of my clients do, those are eligible, meaning if they wanted to sell them, they could transition them into the registered category and then they could be sold. If they sit ineligible, they're not for sale. Well, this went on to say that 16.6 million ounces were pulled out of registered and actually left COMEX, completely moved out of COMEX, meaning that's gone forever. Who would have done that? Silver is something called a Giffen good, which means the higher the price goes, the greater the demand. You have stress inside of major exchanges, all of these deliveries. The LBMA, as we've talked about, is bleeding. The LBMA has 2 billion ounces in contracts that should stand for delivery. They're deliverable contracts backed by a 140 million ounce float. In other words, they have sold those 140 million ounces over and over and over and over and over and over, thinking no one ever stands for delivery. But now all of a sudden, everyone's standing for delivery. What could possibly go wrong? If you were worth $5 billion, do you think that you would know the rich and famous or the powerful people? You would. You don't get that kind of money without being at the highest level of the game.
That's right.
And when you're at the highest level, you know the insiders, and the insiders are telling their cohorts, this is what's going to happen. So slowly, using the suppression of rhetoric and of price all these years to cover what they were doing. And you wake up one day and be like, wow, what happened to the price of silver? How the hell did that go? And why are all these deliveries happening? What about the delivery delays in London, which are 8 weeks? It's supposed to be 1 day, T+1, you get your silver. Now it's T+8 weeks, because the Bank of England says we have a shortage of manpower and trucks and such demand. Really? So the Bank of England doesn't have enough trucks to move my silver. That's a problem. I have to wait 8 weeks.
It's really happening.
They're getting their delivery failures. And Jeffrey Gundlach, the bond king, who's made his living selling bonds, the antithesis of gold, because it pays interest, says 25% allocation to metals is undervalued. So you have the biggest money on the planet, not only the central banks and the commercial banks, and the sovereign wealth funds gobbling it up. You have the most sophisticated traders in North America standing for delivery on billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions every single month. Real quick, just to make that point, just in the first 12 days of the contract for December, which went off the board the day after Thanksgiving, and that was the night where they shut the market down for 11 hours because it overheated, supposedly. None of the other 1,000 commodities servers overheated that are traded on COMEX, just gold and silver. as it was going off the board. But through day 12, deliveries have reached 58 million ounces of silver and 2.85 million ounces of gold, with contracts still being added daily. So who's got the kind of money to buy 58 million ounces of silver in the first 12 days of this month? Think about that for a second. Who's got the money to buy 3 million ounces of gold? Think about that for a minute. You're talking billions upon billions upon billions upon billions. Most important thing to take away from all of these videos we do is whether you buy gold or silver from Miles Franklin, I hope you do. But if you don't, buy assets. You need to own assets right now, period. If you own currency, you're dead in the water. And you can measure anything going back 50 years. Take any asset, anything that you would own, your house, a car, anything, measure it in ounces of gold, and the price is collapsing. Measure it in dollars, and it's going through the roof. The dollar is dying. And the problem is that we measure things in terms of dollars, measure it in terms of ounces of gold. And the interesting thing about this, the new BRICS unit currency that they're using, they are measuring each currency. So it's a basket of 40% gold, 60% currency, BRICS plus currencies. Those currencies are measured in terms of their value against gold, not gold value against those currencies. In other words, it's how many ounces of gold can you get for your currency, not what is your currency worth in gold. It's the other way around. And if you measure things in ounces of gold, which is the barometer, which is the stability, then all of a sudden you see the truth. But it's measuring it against currencies that are continuously devaluing through inflation and through money creation. And in particular, every currency around the world for years has devalued their currency against ours, not only to make manufacturing more competitive to sell to us, but because the dollar was the world reserve currency. And they couldn't get enough dollars just simply through trade alone. So they had to buy dollars in the open market by selling their currency, which devalues their currency, which increases the value against our currency. Our currency goes up against theirs, so they can buy oil, transact business. And so it's been a faulty measuring stick. Why measure the value of your currency against a basket of horse crap currencies that are continuously devaluing against yours? You have the Wall Street talking heads that are talking to the institutionals, right? They're not talking to you and me. Jeffrey Gundlach is not talking to you and me. The chief investment officer of Morgan Stanley is not talking to you and I. And Michael Hartnett's newsletter, the lead analyst for Bank of America, is in the thousands of dollars. He's talking to the institutional traders.
That's right.
And he's saying 25%. So, it's changing. I think you will see problems with the banks that are over leveraged and undercapitalized. They're, as you and I were talking about off air, and those are the regional banks. Those are the U.S. banks in the state of Minnesota, like U.S. Bank. These are the
of commercial real estate, which is ready to be the loans need to be reset.
Yep.
Owned by small and mid-sized banks.
Right. The regional banks like U.S. Bank in the state of Minnesota, which isn't a commercial bank, it'd be a large regional bank. But these banks are the ones that are on the hook for this. You see the Federal Reserve now pivoting, getting rid of quantitative tightening, as they said they would do, which would be selling all of these assets off their balance sheet, which, again, will reignite the inflation spigot on top of lowering rates. And the rumor is that they're going to start buying $40 billion a month again of treasuries to suppress rates because no one wants our treasuries. But this is in order to ease the burden of an employment market that is starting to crater. And I don't know how much it will really work, but they figure if the cost of running a business gets much, much higher, then they will come at the expense of employees. Well, if they lower rates again, which got us in this problem to begin with, bring in AI, which kneecaps entry-level jobs and a lot of good white-collar jobs. My son, who works for me now, was an accountant at Price Waterhouse, getting paid $80,000 to analyze a balance sheet of a real estate investment trust. AI can do that in 1 second without having to pay $80,000 to a kid out of college. And you and I were talking about your upcoming travels. When you go to the Minneapolis airport, look around. There's one cashier when you come out, if you park your car there. Everything else is automated. Something I just read, the net short exposure for the 5 big U.S. banks that have been involved in suppressing the price, they slashed them over the past couple of months from $20 9,000 short contracts to just 6,700 short contracts. That they cut 22,000 contracts, short contracts, the U.S. banks have. And in essence, they have been actively covering their silver shorts since July and through November and December. Maybe this is what all the deliveries are about. So the U.S. banks right now are largely, if not entirely, out of the silver short position, leaving the foreign banks and other foreign commercial banks with most of the remaining exposure. You want to talk about how they could blow up the whole European system? If one of these banks has a delivery failure that starts to really gather steam, and all of the European banks are tied together systemically, and the Bank of England is where it's all held, and the Bank of England at the LBMA is way rehypothecated, meaning selling those 140 million ounces so many times that you have 2 billion ounces of contracts that could stand for delivery. It's an interesting theory to think,
Well, no,
is
but
he really doing this?